Imagine a winter night when the firewood is gone. The hearth has burned down to nothing but dying embers, and the cold begins to slip through every crack in the walls. That was the moment many medieval villages were forced to rely on a heat source that would make modern people shudder. The warmth from decaying manure and rotting waste. They understood perfectly that anything decomposing gives off heat, so when wood ran scarce or winter dragged longer than expected, medieval families didn't wait for a miracle. They piled straw, dry leaves, livestock manure, and organic scraps into massive compost mounds, as tall as a person, constantly steaming in the frozen air. These living furnaces were often built right against the house, beside the livestock shed, or next to sleeping areas. The stones, bricks, and wooden walls around them silently absorbed that heat and released it through the night, just enough to keep water from freezing and fingers from going numb. Some places even built dedicated compost huts, warm enough inside to mend clothes, fix tools, or shelter through a brutal night. The smell was never the priority, because when the firewood ran out, medieval people survived on the heat of decay itself. Today, eco-farms and greenhouses still quietly use this trick. The only question left is, if it ever came down to it, would you dare step into a room heated by manure? When the house was so cold that every breath turned into mist and not a single piece of firewood was left to burn, medieval people knew they couldn't afford to waste heat on the whole room. They had to send the warmth straight into their bodies. And that's when a simple but life-saving trick came into play. Pre-baking their clothes before wearing them. After every batch of bread or the evening stew, when the oven was still gently warm, they stuffed wool shirts, cloaks, socks, and even damp boots into the cooling chamber. Just a few minutes inside was enough to drive out every trace of moisture, the very thing that could turn fingers purple or make toes go numb before morning. Homes without an oven used heated stones wrapped in cloth, pressing them into sleeves, pant legs, and collars to start up their clothing before stepping outside. This wasn't a luxury, it was strategy. Warm clothes right away kept muscles from stiffening, breathing steady, and panic at bay when the cold came crashing in. On the harshest days, some families even spread their outer layers over warm ashes before sleep, creating a brief, rare moment of comfort in the brutal winter. Today we have heaters, electric warmers, and all kinds of conveniences. But sometimes a single garment warmed by the last heat of the hearth is enough to remind us that survival has always begun with the smallest things. In the medieval world, where winter could swallow an entire valley overnight, not everyone had enough firewood to keep a flame alive until morning. So many families had to rely on a heat source they never named, yet understood better than any modern engineer: winter sunlight and dark-colored stone. What surprises most people is that even without knowing anything about thermal mass or infrared absorption, peasants had unintentionally created a form of passive heating that today's green architecture spends thousands of dollars trying to replicate. They built south-facing walls out of black stone or mineral-rich earth so that even the weak winter sun could seep into every layer. During the day, those stones silently drank in heat. At night, they released a thin veil of warmth, so subtle you might think it was useless, until you realize that those few degrees were enough to keep someone from freezing in a draft-proof bedroom. Some villages even paved their yards with dark stone, placed benches beside sun-warmed walls, or used sun traps made from thinned horn or oiled parchment to hold on to every bit of heat around their windows. And here's the twist that stops people in their tracks. Some families survived entire winters with almost no fire at all, simply by steering the sun as if they already understood the physics we only named centuries later. Of course, that system wasn't magic. It was patience, observation, and the belief that every beam of light was worth saving. If you found these tricks fascinating or hard to believe, leave a comment and tell me whether you think modern people could ever learn to live this way again. Your answer might surprise you. In the coldest months of the Middle Ages, when every breath turned into fog and the water in the bucket froze solid inside the house, people didn't survive on fire alone. They survived on the animals they raised. It sounds strange, but it's a blunt truth. The livestock barn wasn't an extension of the home. It was the heating system. Cows, goats, pigs, even a small flock of chickens all produced steady heat, and medieval families quickly learned that if the animals stayed on the lower floor while they slept above, the warmth would naturally rise through wooden planks or packed earth floors. These house barns weren't improvised. They were intentional designs found from the Alps to Scandinavia, keeping homes 10-15 degrees warmer than the outdoors without burning a single extra log. The elderly, children, and the sick were often placed near the shared wall with the barn, where the heat was strongest. Families too poor to have an upper floor sometimes hung their beds directly over the livestock area, essentially sleeping on top of a living furnace. The smell and the noise were impossible to avoid, but none of that mattered when the alternative was shivering through the night or losing fingers to frostbite. What few people realize is that this system worked so well that it still exists in its original form on many mountain farms in Europe today, proving that survival didn't come from luxury, but from something far simpler: the warmth of a living creature right beside you. And if you find this hard to believe, then you've just touched the very truth. Medieval people understood deeply. Survival always comes with uncomfortable trade-offs. On winter nights when the dirt floor felt like ice and the wind could cut through every crack in the wall, medieval people knew they couldn't defeat the cold with fire. They had to outsmart it by creating a shelter directly beneath their own bodies. That's how the straw nest was born. They dug shallow hollows into the ground, lined them with thick layers of dry straw, and covered the top with animal hide or coarse cloth to turn it into a cocoon warmed by breath and body heat. But what most modern people don't realize is that this system was incredibly fragile. If the straw was even slightly damp, packed too tightly, or layered incorrectly, cold air could get trapped inside, making the sleeper breathe moisture-heavy air that led to chills, lung infections, and sometimes death in just a few days. That's why preparing the straw nest wasn't a casual chore. It was a nightly survival ritual the whole family had to handle with care. When many slept together, they curled up with the children in the middle and the stronger adults on the outside, forming a natural heat cluster. Within minutes, the sealed straw cocoon became the warmest place in the house, no matter how harsh the wind or how deep the snow outside. To medieval people, the straw nest wasn't a bed. It was the final fortress against winter's silent death, and only those who built it properly had a real chance of waking up the next morning. In medieval homes, where the stone floors were colder than night frost and wooden chairs could drain every bit of warmth from your body within minutes, people didn't just fear the cold. They respected it like an invisible force waiting for the slightest mistake. And from that fear came a set of crude, yet almost mythical, heating techniques. Insulated chairs, hollow straw cushions, and heat-holding stones that worked like talismans. Every night, as the kitchen fire burned down, medieval families understood that sitting in the wrong spot could cause a sudden drop in body temperature, leading to numb limbs or a cold fever by morning. So they created cushions stuffed with straw, wool scraps, or hemp fibers to place on chairs. Beneath the coarse fabric was a hollow pocket that kept the icy air from touching the body. More crucial were the flat stones heated near the fading embers, then wrapped in animal hide. Placed under a seat or pressed against the back, they released a steady warmth for hours, like carrying a small hidden fire through the dark. Some families even built seating ledges against the kitchen wall, where heat from the cooking chamber slowly seeped through stone and wood, creating a secret, warm zone only the household knew about.
The harvest was plentiful
Perhaps what
this year.
made these techniques feel almost magical was how quietly they appeared and disappeared the moment the fire died. No one ever saw a flame, yet everyone felt their life depending on those final traces of heat. If you've ever sat down on a shockingly cold surface, imagine living in a time when that tiny mistake could cost you a full night's sleep. And if this makes you wonder just how creative people in the past really were, leave a comment. Your curiosity might uncover another winter secret from the medieval world, when winter nights stretched so long that even a candle seemed to tremble in the draught, and every corner of the house felt like a stone cave. Medieval people understood that no material on earth was stronger than the human body itself. So they turned sleep, something we see as ordinary, into a tense survival ritual. No one slept alone, no one spread out. Everyone gathered into a tight cluster like a single living creature, each breath merging with the next to hold on to every fragile thread of warmth. The strong slept on the outside, the weak in the center. Children were placed close to their mother's chest, and the elderly were always kept in the warmest spot. They arranged themselves in a chest-to-back formation, layering wool blankets, cloaks, and animal hides on top until they formed a sealed, warm-air cocoon where just one person shifting out of place could chill the entire cluster.
Out of here.
On the coldest nights, they even brought dogs, goats, or chickens into the nest. The warmth from those small bodies could be the difference between someone waking up or slipping into cold-induced unconsciousness. It sounds harsh, but that was the logic of survival. Instead of heating the whole house, they protected one thing, the tiny pocket of heat beneath the blankets. And the most shocking part isn't that they slept packed together, but that they knew with absolute certainty. If the sleep cluster broke apart, winter would claim the weakest before dawn. In an age of soft mattresses and personal space, do you think you could sleep like that just to survive a single night? In medieval houses where thick stone walls still let winter cut through like a knife, people didn't wait for fire to save them. They built soft shields that covered the entire room. But these coverings were nothing like the cozy decorations modern people imagine. They were a blend of skill, desperation, and sometimes the lingering traces of death. In the coldest regions, families hung animal hides, still carrying the smoky scent of the last hunt, combined with scraps of coarse wool, unwashed sheep's fleece, and fabric patches salvaged from the clothes of the deceased. Everything was stitched, tied, and layered into thick barriers that blocked drafts from every crack in the wall. Each layer adding a little warmth, each frayed edge stopping one more stream of freezing air. Doorways were sealed with hides or old burial shrouds, because in winter, anything that could trap heat became priceless. In the larger beds of wealthier households, heavy canopies were lowered to turn the bed into a mini room that preserved every warm breath. What surprises many people today is that these coverings weren't decoration. They were the thin line between life and death.
What do you think?
When the fire died and the night wind hissed across the roof, it was those worn fabric layers that held onto the last degrees of warmth, and many families survived because of them. When the sun dipped and darkness swallowed the village, medieval people knew the real battle. With winter didn't happen in front of the fire. It happened after the fire died. The moment the hearth cooled was when helplessness felt sharpest. The house went cold, the wind cut deeper, and only a faint, fading warmth clung to the stone walls and gray ash. But from those final traces of heat, they created one of the smartest survival techniques of their age. When firewood ran out or couldn't be burned any longer, the whole family gathered every blanket, straw mat, and cloak into the kitchen, the one place where stone and brick still held the evening stew's leftover warmth. Stones buried in ash were wrapped in animal hide to make heat stones, tucked under feet against the belly, or inside bedding to stay warm through the night. Many families even turned the kitchen floor into their main sleeping area, curling up right beside the still warm oven. It wasn't laziness, it was strategy. If the fire died too early, the cold would spill into the house like a silent predator, leaving everyone shivering until dawn and claiming the weakest before morning. What's fascinating is that this method, which seems poor and desperate, mirrors the same thermal mass principles praised in modern architecture. Medieval people didn't brag, didn't need scientific terms. They only knew that when the whole family huddled beside a dying hearth, they were doing the one thing that might save their lives. Most of us picture medieval winters as roaring fireplaces, huge stacks of firewood, and warm, glowing homes standing firm against blizzards. But the truth was the exact opposite. Most of their winter nights unfolded in darkness, in biting cold, and with heating strategies no modern person would ever think of. And from those seemingly crude tricks, straw nests, heat stones, hide-covered walls, and tightly packed sleeping clusters, we see something far more important than just survival methods. Medieval people didn't rely on luck. They relied on intelligence and relentless effort. What surprises people most is that many of the techniques you just saw aren't outdated at all. In an era where power outages can happen anytime, snowstorms hit harder, and energy costs keep climbing, those ancient solutions are quietly returning as practical alternatives. Their mindset was simple and powerful. When fire fails, community, resourcefulness, and the ability to capture every last thread of warmth are what save lives. And maybe that's the most valuable lesson they left behind. Winter is never frightening when you are prepared, and warmth often comes from the very things modern people overlook. If any of these techniques made you rethink what survival really means, leave a comment and tell me which one surprised you the most. And if you want to keep uncovering the survival secrets history tried to hide, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next story.